Hey everybody, Matt here. Thanks for stopping by. I'm excited today to start a new series of videos about making things with corrugated cardboard. So if you've ever done any shopping online and had a product shipped to your home, it probably arrived in a corrugated box. When you peel the top paper layer away, you can reveal the paper corrugations here. These ridges is what gives the box its strength. Now you can see where the corrugations are even without peeling the layer back, just by kind of paying attention to the way the light reflects off of the cardboard. Now, this kind of packaging material is a little bit different than other kinds of packaging material. This is, a different kind of a box, and it's made with cardboard that doesn't have any corrugations in it at all. It's just flat. And in fact, it can be made to bend in any direction. It's not as strong. Versus the corrugated cardboard, if I orient the corrugations this way, say parallel with the edge of the table, and I push down, it's fairly easy to get the cardboard to bend following the corrugations. If I rotate it 90 degrees, so now the corrugations are this way, but the edge of the table, of course, is this way, and I push down, the cardboard is really quite stiff, because in order to fold the cardboard over, it's got to fold across each of the corrugations. Now, it's possible to do it, but it takes a lot more effort. So in this series of videos, we're going to be exploring how we can make things and take advantage of the corrugations built into the cardboard. So for my first project, I'm going to be looking at rebuilding, or actually making, a brand new box for our Christmas tree. It's January of 2019 as I film this, and as you can see, this box has just absolutely had it. So I am going to use some reclaimed cardboard and see if I can make a new box. So as I said, this is January of 2019 as I film this, and a lot of my neighbors where I live got themselves some new flat screen TVs for the holidays. And so what I did was I collected a bunch of those boxes and cut out the large flat panels, and you can see the cardboard is pretty stiff. So I'm going to use this as my building material for the box for the Christmas tree. And you can see this panel by itself is plenty large enough. It's plenty long enough. So I'm going to cut some panels out and piece together a cardboard box, probably a little bit bigger than this one, to store the Christmas tree in. So there's a bunch of different ways I could try and join the cardboard panels together to make the box. What I'm going to try is using joint compound. So when I went shopping for some joint compound, I found from USG two different kinds, one with a green lid and one with a blue. And as far as I can tell, the green lid joint compound is a little bit heavier and it dries a little bit harder. So I'm going to give this one a try first, but if that doesn't work out, I have this kind to try. This one's a little bit lighter and a little bit easier to sand. So a little bit harder, a little bit heavier, a little bit lighter, a little bit easier to sand. So we'll see how it works out. To reinforce the corners, I'm going to use just your typical paper sheetrock joint tape. And this kind of paper tape has a nice crease in it already that allows you to very easily fold it right down the middle so you can form a corner. I also have this sort of self-adhesive netting type tape, which I could try alternatively if for some reason the paper tape doesn't work out so well. The difference here is that there's no crease, so it's a little bit difficult to form into a corner. I think this stuff is typically used when you're butt joining a couple of pieces of sheetrock and you put a piece of tape right down the middle. This stuff might form a stronger joint, whereas this paper tape is really good for in the corners. And since the box is filled with corners, I'm going to try this first. To spread the joint compound, I'm just going to use a standard metal putty knife. You can tell this one's very well used. I've had it for years and years. Got a couple of different widths. I can cut all the cardboard with a typical utility knife. Nothing fancy here. After the joint compound dries, I may choose to sand it a little bit. I've got a sanding block that's typically used for sanding dried joint compound, and I've got some drywall sanding screens here to use. So I've got all the tools that I need. Time to get to work. So basically the idea here is to take the cardboard panels and use the old cardboard box to kind of eyeball how big I want the new box to be. Mark where I want to make the cut lines using a T-square, and then use the utility knife to actually cut out the parts. In this shot, I'm joining one of the sides to the bottom of the box. So I'm just using the joint compound to kind of butter the edges of the side and then the bottom of the box, joining them together and clamping them in place with these right angle clamps. Once I've got the clamps set into place with the right angle blocks, turn the whole thing upside down, and then go ahead and use joint compound and sheetrock tape to tape the outside corner of the box. Now with just the outside corner of the box taped, that makes the joint a hinge, which of course is not what we want. With both outside corners taped, now I've got two hinges, and of course I don't want those side panels to flop around, so I just cut out a couple of quick little cardboard brackets that slip over the sides just to keep the side panels upright while I'm working on the inside corners of the box. One of the things I discovered when I went to tape the inside of the box is that the shiny decal that's on the outside of the cardboard just won't hold on to joint compound, so I had to score through the decal and peel it away. So I exposed just the bare cardboard so the joint compound had something to stick to. With the decal peeled away, now I'm ready to tape the inside corners. Once the inside and outside corners of the box were taped and the joint compound had a chance to dry, typically I left it for about a day or so, then I was able to stand the box up on end and mark how big the end panels need to be. Once the end pieces are cut to size, then it's just a matter of using the joint compound and the sheetrock tape to secure them in place. So here's what the box looks like so far with 5 sides all joined together. Once all the joint compound was dry, now I had a chance just to test out the box so far and see how strong these joints really were. And it was at this point I got really encouraged because the joints seemed very strong. I was able to pull on the panels and none of the joint compound cracked or felt like it was going to give way, so this was pretty encouraging. So now I'm ready to peel the decal off of some other panels to start working on the lid for the box. Here I'm using the box to size how large the lid has to be. In this series of shots, I'm sizing up how big the ends of the lid need to be. These little sections, I actually call them end caps, and they were kind of fun to make. The combination of cutting and bending and then gluing together with the joint compound some cardboard pieces to make the end portions of the lid. This is a shot of both of the end caps all cut, folded, and glued together using the joint compound, and here they're clamped to the hollow blocks just to keep them in position as the joint compound dries. And here's what the finished end caps look like. In this series of shots, I'm using the end caps put in place on top of the box, and then the whole thing turned upside down on the panel that's going to become the top part of the lid, just to get how big that top panel needs to be. Once the top panel is cut roughly to size, then it's time to mark where the end caps go and to go ahead and secure them to the top panel, the top of the lid, using the joint compound. The next couple of shots show the weights and clamps that I use just to try and keep the end caps in position on the lid while the joint compound dried. Next up, I cut some filler pieces for the inside portion of the lid and secured everything with the joint compound. Here are the weights I used on those inside filler pieces for the lid, just trying to keep everything in position while the joint compound dried. In this shot, you can see where the two filler pieces that were secured to the inside of the lid formed a kind of hinge, and you can see where it's creased there right in the middle of the hinge. So we're going to have to put some side panels on the lid just to make sure that the lid stays nice and flat. Once the joint compound dried, then it was time to sort of test fit the lid as far as it's been assembled so far. And this little shot shows how things look. And again, I'm very encouraged. It seems like things are going along pretty well. You can also see in this shot that I haven't had a chance to put the side panels on the lid yet. I was just too anxious. I wanted to see how the lid fit on the box. In the next series of shots, I'm putting those side panels on the lid, and as usual, using joint compound and the sheetrock tape to tape the inside and outside corners. Here's a shot of the pail for the joint compound. I've almost used the whole pail so far. With the joint compound for the lid all dry and the lid all trimmed up, now it was time to test fit the lid back on the box. And I gotta say, it fit pretty well. The whole box seems pretty sturdy. It's very encouraging. This whole project is turning out better than I originally imagined. So in this next series of shots, I wanted to check out the box and the lid just to see how square everything was coming out. The box looks pretty square. Using the T-square there's not too many gaps. All the panels seem pretty square to each other. The lid, however, is not quite as square, and there's a definite bow in the top panel for the lid, but that's okay. This was the first time I ever tried anything like this. If I were to do it again, I would pay extra special attention to trying to keep the lid nice and flat. So now it's time to give the box and lid a light sanding and then give it a quick coat of paint. Here's what the finished box and lid looks like after the paint dried.
Alright, I'm going to call this project done. It actually turned out a lot better than I originally imagined, and I learned a few things along the way. The first thing was to make sure that I peel any decals off of the cardboard before I go ahead and try and use the joint compound to stick the panels together. So the decals in my case peeled off pretty easily. So if you try anything like this, make sure you do that. The other thing that I really learned is that these right angle brackets and clamps, these really were a godsend, because it was like having several extra pairs of hands to hold things in position while the joint compound dried, which actually took quite a while for the joint compound to dry. So that was the other thing that I learned. I really didn't imagine that this was going to take several weeks of calendar time to put together this box, but that was primarily because the joint compound took so long to dry. I would normally put together a couple of panels and tape the inside and outside corners, and then wait at least a day, maybe even 2 days, to give the joint compound enough time to set up. The other thing I learned is that in doing this project, I used almost the complete pail for this one box, so that was kind of interesting. But I have plenty of joint tape left, so didn't use much tape, but used quite a bit of joint compound. If I was to try this again with joint compound, I would keep that in mind. The other thing that I realized too while doing this is that having a very large, this is a 48-inch drywall T-square, this was immensely useful in laying out the cut lines on the cardboard, and even in some cases using this as a guide for the utility knife. So once again, I think this came out pretty well. Of course, there's more I could do to the box. I could put another coat of paint on it. I could fix up some of the joint compound and make it look a little bit smoother. But this is just a storage box, so I think it came out great for that. So let me go ahead and move the camera, and I'll show you what it looks like with the Christmas tree actually inside the box. So here's the Christmas tree actually stored away in the box. And you can see that there's plenty of room. If I was to make another box for the Christmas tree, I would probably make it a little bit wider. But you can see that everything fits in there nicely. There's plenty of room. It's not so squished in like in the original cardboard box.